Good morning, good afternoon, and of course good evening, wherever in the world you may be. Today I wanted to do a video that is again part of my looking into the lives of those who look into ours. Yes, those little darling Agony uncles out there. Well, as you may or may not know, we've covered the ever-obnoxious Jeremy Kyle and the oh-so-try-to-be-charming Jerry Springer, but today we're going to be having a look at a man, if you can call him that, who I'd say is more of an earache than that of both Jeremy and Jerry. And yes, you guessed it, probably by looking at the title, you cheeky nippers. Steve Wilkos. Well, where to start with this overshine meatball? Steve Wilkos was born Stephen John Wilkos on the 9th of March 1964 in Chicago to Jeanette and Stanley Wilkos. Jeanette was a beauty school instructor, and although it was unfortunate that she couldn't use her skills to prevent dear Stephen from resembling that of Alice the Goon as he matured, I'm sure she excelled at her job. Much, it would seem, like his father Stanley, who worked in the police force for about 30 years. No doubt this dedication influenced Steve to one day follow in his father's footsteps. So yes, Steve went to Lane Tech High School and graduated at 18 years of age. It was also within the same year of his graduation that he joined the U.S. Marine Corps, in which I believe he spent 7 years with. After leaving the Marines, he went on to join the Chicago Police Department, just as his dear daddy did. No doubt all were very proud, of course. But then one day in 1994, whilst he was supposedly at a security post in Chicago, he was contacted about maybe doing a temporary position for the ever-popular Springer show as security. Well, once you have a pile of shit, you're no doubt going to attract a few flies. Nevertheless, it would seem he liked his newfound fame, as narcissistic people often do, because as of 2001 he quit his job to get involved in presentation himself. But prior to much of this, Steve had also been married a near handful of times. Firstly to Rose Wilkos in 1985, but unfortunately the spark had gone out not long after it was lit, as they separated by 1987. Accordingly, this was due to a lack of trust and understanding, amongst other things, I'm sure. Who knows what goes on behind closed doors? Maybe he had a habit of throwing chairs into the walls, if she didn't butter his bread just right. So there were no ties after that with Rosé. They hadn't had any children, so of course Steve was free and single, and in no time, just a few years be it, he met a lady called Hannah, who soon bared the Wilkos name also. But old habits do indeed die hard, and again within the same year they tied the knot. Things came to a swift end, it would seem. So, despite all of his apparent masculine traits, he clearly couldn't compensate for something. He was obviously doing something somewhere wrong. But funny enough, it was around this time that his newfound profession supposedly led him to feel that he could do better than most of the previous totty he'd been hitting the town with, and with this he went on to get engaged and of course later marry a fellow television producer called Rachel in the year 2000. So third time lucky it would seem for Steve, as time continued to do what it does oh so well. They stayed together and even managed to breed, thus bringing two little sprogs into the world. And to add to that, they got the best of both, with a girl named Ruby in 2004, and a boy called Jack 2 years later, I believe. Well, it would seem things were nice and steady, a family to feed and an ever-growing career, it would seem. But why does it seem that Steve Wilkos' fame can't hold a candle to that of Springer's? After all, they are friends, and Steve often fills in for Jerry when he's away counting his money on some tropical island, and they also shared a little cameo together in the second installment of the Austin Powers films. But even if you were to take away any possible comparisons, Steve, along with those behind the show to some extent of course, has been nominated for the Prism Awards for raising awareness in regards to illegal drugs. He has also played host to the Daytime Entertainment Creative Arts Emmy Awards, and also lends us his voice in yet another cameo, this time with The Simpsons. And not to forget, he's also made a small name for himself in regards to, let us say, low-budget wrestling, whereby in 2002, I believe it was, he made a pro wrestling debut where he teamed up with ex-WWF lightweight Gilbert to go ahead against Dino Devine and Chad Bowman in what was titled as the main event. Yes, it sounds thrilling, doesn't it? Well, like I say, with all this to his name, even though that's probably not saying much, why is it more people seem to hate rather than appreciate little Stevie? Well, that's probably because, as said before, he is what he is, and that would seem very much to be an over-polished chrome dome who not only resembles a phallic sex object, but has about the same personality, that being that when shoved in your general direction, he's nothing but a pain in the arse. Not only is he a typical loudmouth, have-to-shout everything-I-say type of laddie, but he's all that plus a typical power-craving policeman type. Or ex-policeman, I should say. Now, don't get me wrong. I know full well that to be a police officer is of course a very committed job, to an extent, but in the US, many people seem to see police how I imagine Catholics see the Pope. Yes, they can and do risk their lives at times, but it's all part of the parcel, just as you could argue the same for those who work as prison guards, or yet such people like zookeepers, who manage wild and dangerous animals and so on. The list really could be next to endless with all these potentially dangerous jobs that are out there, but I'd put my shilling on it that many other people don't spend what seems to be every waking moment talking about how they once worked a potentially dangerous job. Half of the comments Steve Wilkos makes about himself are to do with his decade, give or take, working as an officer. My God, get over yourself. I'd probably even consider to be somewhat lenient with this, but I'm surprised America has very many police fatalities at all, given the way they're all suited and booted up. Not only do most of them carry a utility belt that would put Batman's to shame, but the very second most, if not near all of them, feel slightly threatened, they usually have backup arrive within minutes, and that tends to consist of about 15 police cars, 3 helicopters, 10 specialist dog units, and a van carrying half of the cast of bloody X-Men to back them up. Sorry to sound like I'm getting excited, but the sheer comparisons alone are quite amusing. Our bobbies, at best, or worst, might just have enough of a care to maybe throw a pebble at you given chase. But anyway, I can always make a video detailing my opinions regarding police, specifically another time. Yes, back to Steve. If this wasn't irritating enough, the very way he deals with his guests, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't care much for the safety of people who abuse women, children, animals, or anyone really for that matter, but two wrongs don't always make a right, and if all Steve Wilkos is going to do by having these people walk onto his show is then basically get in their faces and tell them to get off and get out, well, firstly, why bother to begin with? Except, of course, to play up to the audience and show off his bravado. And not only this, but many of these types of people are more likely to just feel even worse about themselves and their acts, and usually when this emotion comes over these types of deviants, they're only more likely to go out and act out another horrible fantasy or frustration just to make themselves feel better. So despite what Steve's precious executive producer Richard, or as I like to call him Dick, Dominic, may have to say in regards to him manhandling the guests for entertainment, Steve might want to try thinking for himself and consider those types of consequences, as people can be very unpredictable. Just remember, Steve, only an idiot speaks before he thinks, and to be below that, you let others speak for you. To add to his annoyance, he also does not take criticism well. At all, no. He even stooped so low as to basically merchandise his name by saying to people who would send him negative emails and letters, etc. in regards to his show, that if you're not a knucklehead belly rubber, whatever the hell that means, that you'd be given a t-shirt. He also follows this up by saying anyone who sends him negative messages was not allowed to watch. Yes, prat. And even goes on to say that his show is moron-free. Well, that's an outright lie to begin with when the person bloody hosting the show is a moron himself. So yes, it's easy to see why these types of talk shows don't tend to do, well, so well over here at least, anyway, in England, especially the likes of anything even remotely resembling the Steve Wilkos show. I doubt very much the people of this country never mind all the other places that could be mentioned, would deplete their brain cells in order to watch such tripe. With that, I doubt Steve Wilkos would ever see this video, but if indeed he did, all I feel I can say is, instead of having to shout the rooftop down, or feel you're a big man by throwing weightless chairs into a chipboard wall, just remember that truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. And with that, I take my leave. I don't think there's much else to be said about this man. So anyway, as always, my dear poppets, thank to all those who watch, thanks again to those who subscribe, and until next time, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and from me, a very good night, as always, to all.